Well, hi everybody. It's Joe Chaffee here on this Monday night, March the 9th, 2020. Joe Rayo on my left, and it's the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So,
Yes,
did,
indeed.
did you enjoy yourself today
You mean watching my money fritter away on my
on your
401?
yeah, your 401k became a 301k.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, it's just money. It's such a burden. Oh, well.
Well, we can.
Anyhow, well, markets are up in the aftermarket, so maybe there'll be a snapback rally tomorrow.
We would hope, wouldn't we?
Well, you drop a. That's what they always used to call a dead cat bounce.
Right, right.
The idea was when you drop a cat off the Empire State Building that even that would bounce. Yes. So
Yes, yes.
I know. I'm sure. I just aggravated all the PETA fans out there. But then again, if I didn't, I would have nothing to live for.
Precisely, precisely.
So did you enjoy the really nice day today? Because actually you were as warm as I was down here in South Florida. We made it up into the low 70s, and that was about it. But you made it up into the low 70s.
73 degrees here in Putnam Valley at 2:20 this afternoon. One of the nicest days that we've had around here in a very long time. I said to my wife, I said we ought to open a couple of windows. It's probably warmer outside than it is inside.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a very, very nice day. And it's going to be a nice night overnight tonight, milder than you would normally expect in early March after such a warm afternoon. And
Yeah, usually when you have a day like this, it doesn't cool. The nights don't cool off as much as much as you'd think. And also, this is a time of year where, I've been saying this for about 4 days now. We're talking about Monday today. I was going for temperatures getting above 70 because this is a time of year where you almost always under the conditions that we had today, which was high pressure to the south and a west wind and sunshine all day long. You wind up outperforming the temperatures. They always wind up going higher than what models tell you, and it
you're
worked out perfectly today.
you're absolutely right. I did not think that we were going to see locally. Now, yesterday we were at 60 degrees, and I said, all right, how high could we go today? And I said, I think the absolute highest would be around 68, 69 degrees. So when I checked the weather station and saw 72 as around 2 o'clock this afternoon, my eyes bulged out. I said, wow, it's really that warm out there. I had a chance to step outside until right about that time, but it turned out to be very, very nice. And tonight we have a full moon to look at, the sap or worm moon of March.
Is it a super moon?
It depends on what rule you look at. Actually, the moon next month will be a tad closer to the Earth and just a fraction larger in apparent size than tonight's full moon. But if you want to call tonight a super moon, far be it from me to stop you. Go
Okay.
out and look
Well,
at the.
I pulled up the current temperatures at 8 p.m. and the interesting thing about Long Island, I'm not there right now, but this is also so typical of the spring. It's excuse me, it's mostly in the mid 40s to around 50 through all of Suffolk County and
Right.
low 50s, even in Nassau County. The sea breeze came in probably mid to late afternoon and really knocked the temperatures down. But if you just go New York City at 8 o'clock is 64. It's in the 60s across all of the northern half of New Jersey, even South Jersey. A few pockets of upper 50s, but that's because there's probably some radiational cooling going on with clear skies and light winds. Everybody else is sitting pretty much in the low 60s. Up your way, Joe, it's still what is that? 64. It doesn't give the location, but it's west of the Hudson near you.
That's probably
Danbury is 64. Poughkeepsie is 66. Up the Hudson Valley north of Kingston, it's still 65. And you head up to Albany, it's 65 there. I mean, it's really warm pretty much all the way up into upstate New York and up through much of southern and central New England.
And we have a few high, thin clouds in the sky right now, Joe, but there's a more solid area, a swath of high cloudiness over western Pennsylvania. And for those who are going to be out late tonight, probably after midnight, I would say, you might want to check that full moon because it is quite possible that those high clouds will produce a ring or halo around the moon that's caused by refraction or bending of moonlight, causing this big circle around the moon. Always a lovely thing to see, and sometimes an indication of a change in the weather. And we are going to see a change because whereas today was beautiful, dry, and mild, it looks like we may be in line tomorrow for some showery weather coming in during the mainly afternoon period on into tomorrow evening.
Yeah, I got the loop up, and it's still clear. Uh, you can see there's some wispy high clouds that are coming in from the west. The heavier overcast is still in western Pennsylvania, westward into a low that's heading for the Great Lakes, and there is a there's a cold front with this, and we're seeing some showers and even a couple of thunderstorms. There's not a whole lot of risk of severe weather though tonight, Joe. There's just a marginal risk of severe weather, eastern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, and a large portion of the state of Missouri under a marginal risk of severe weather, and then a general area of thunderstorms that extends into Ohio and Kentucky, and on the northern end goes up into Iowa and parts of Nebraska. So it just sort of centers right over the middle part of the U.S., and there's not a whole lot of weather going on either side of that. And over the next couple of days, the severe weather risk is really minimal. Certainly compared to what you could see in March, is a small area of marginal risk being indicated tomorrow, pretty much in the same place that it's indicated for tonight. Eastern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, southwest Missouri, and southeastern Kansas. And then on Wednesday, we're looking at the severe weather risk in the similar area, eastern Oklahoma over Arkansas and into northwestern Mississippi and a small portion of southwestern Tennessee. And as far as rainfall is concerned this week, at least for WPC over the next 7 days, looking at a pretty fairly large area of 3 to 5 inch rains from eastern Oklahoma, eastward across Tennessee, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, Arkansas, northeast Texas. Up by us, Joe, the rainfall amounts, nothing really to write home about. The coastal areas, well, for the I-95 corridor anyway, it's about a quarter to a half an inch. And then you go inland up into upstate New York, you get to the 3/4 of an inch to an inch of precip. A lot of rain for the southwestern in California, where we're seeing some patches of 3 to 5 inch rains there, and in Arizona. So the southwest is going to be seeing quite a bit of rainfall setting up. And you know, my impression of the overall weather pattern going forward is, meh. It's not a. We got these weather fronts coming through, two weather fronts and a weak system in between for this week. I mean, there really isn't anything major going on weather-wise, and I don't see any severe weather threats for the work week at least.
Yeah, and in fact, the only, we're going to get a little bit of shower activity tomorrow, maybe a couple of tenths of an inch at most. Then we dry out. The next chance for wet weather comes probably during the early part of Friday in the tri-state area. Then that quickly moves out Friday afternoon, and then we sweep on into what looks to be a dry weekend, although it will be cooler, not colder really, but cooler, more seasonable weather for this time of the year coming up for Saturday on into next Sunday. So again, when you consider, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, Joe, when you consider the time of the year, it is after all early March. At this time of the year, we can have very active weather in terms of severe weather. A couple of years ago, wow, we had the second of 4 nor'easters occurring.
Right.
As opposed to that, this March has been lamb-like from the start, and it may very well be lamb-like when we get to the end.
By the way, one of the interesting things to me, I have the GFS up there while you were speaking, and of course, there's this weak system that we get this front through for tomorrow, which we get a few showers out of that, and that's really about it. I mean, it rains all the way up to Caribou, Maine, for God's sake, and some scattered showers down into Virginia, North Carolina. Again, nothing to write home about in terms of precip. There's a weak system that comes through Wednesday night into Thursday that moves off the mid-Atlantic coast, and that goes out, and it's very weak. I initially had covered for the possibility that there could be a shower Wednesday night into Thursday. I'm going to leave it in there for now. And then you're right. There's another cold front on Friday. But the thing about Friday's system is, Joe, that this was supposed to be a low that back a little less than a week ago, models were taking across Virginia off the Delaware coast and making a snowstorm for Maryland northeast to southern New England, and putting like absolutely ridiculous double-digit amounts. And I'm looking here at this map on the GFS where the low is actually up near James Bay, and it's a simple cold front that's coming through. I mean,
Right.
how wrong was that to try to show some kind of system going by to our south, when in reality it just reverts back to what we've been seeing all along for weeks and weeks on end, and nothing has changed, and nothing is going to change.
Right. Well, as I said last Tuesday, when I saw 22 inches of snow being indicated for Rockland County and the lower Hudson Valley, I said to all the snow lovers out there, if you want to believe this, if you want to hang your hat on it, go right ahead because you haven't had much to hang on, but it ain't happening. And I honestly thought it would go away slowly or gradually, that we'd see less and less snow in the days to follow for the forecast. It went away like within 24 hours. The next two runs of the GFS showed absolutely no indication whatsoever of what it was being indicated for last Tuesday.
Right.
This this historic, had it all panned out, it would have been one of the great historic snowstorms in the Northeast.
Yeah, of course. But they were always the great historic snowstorms for the Northeast on the long range models. If all the ones that were advertised that come true, we would have had about 300 inches for the coast this year
Correct.
instead of three.
You can't do very much without much in the way of a good split flow, and especially without any blocking. And Lord knows we have seen nothing in terms of blocking this winter season.
Oh yeah, and nothing anytime soon. By the way, one of the things that's happening here in the long range, you might notice there's a big 1056 high north of Montana. There is going to be some rather cold air that's going to spread across southern Canada eastward late in the weekend and next week. And this is part of the negative East Pacific oscillation that the teleconnections are sending us in. There's a 1050 high north of Lake Superior on Sunday, Joe. And actually, the GFS does have a little bit of snow going to our south with a weak disturbance Sunday morning in Ohio into West Virginia, Northern Virginia, into Maryland, Delaware, and southern New Jersey. Who knows if that's real, but that kind of sets up where the frontal boundary is. And then, of course, the high moves out and there's no blocking, as you say, and the high goes out to south of Nova Scotia, which means when the precip comes back early next week, it's going to be mostly rain again, going all the way up. It's amazing. It's like how many different ways can you deny snow? And one other thing I want to bring up tonight on the live stream, because I showed this last night, and I'm going to look at the 18Z GFS. But remember yesterday, Joe, we were looking at the stratosphere, how it split the polar vortex in two, which is
Yes.
something we've been waiting for. Well, I just want you to know that I noticed on the very next run, and it continues today, it no longer splits in two. In fact, what winds up happening is that the polar vortex in the stratosphere stretches, and then it just never splits. There's some sort of stratospheric warming that goes on, but it doesn't split it. And the upper low, the polar vortex, essentially recoils itself and moves its way back up over the North Pole again. It is amazing uh, how you get these occasional runs where you it shows up as a pattern change, or at least a hint of a pattern change, and then it just goes right back to the same nonsense. I can't get over the fact that it does that.
So, in other words, what you're saying is that the bottle cap, which has been keeping all the cold air up over the polar regions for most of this season, looked like it was going to be unscrewed a little bit, and maybe we'll get some overfill, but it looks like now that the cap is going to stay firmly in place right on through the end of the month and maybe into the early part of next month.
Okay, the chairman points out, by the way, at 4 o'clock, the park, New York City hit 71, and it was the first 70-degree day since November. Okay. Uh, and the high for the date, the record high, 77 back in 2016.
So there you go. And then we had that it was first time since November that Central Park saw temperatures in the 70s, which indicates that we had balmy conditions carry over right into the middle part of the fall season. Of
Right.
course, I don't know if you remember this because we were together at FiOS One News on Halloween. We not only had temperatures like in the low 70s at like 9 o'clock at night, but we also had a breakout of thunderstorm and tornado activity and all kinds of craziness. More of a signal of the late summer or the early
Yeah,
part
I
of
know. I do remember that. Yeah, that was in the winding days,
yes, yeah,
as they were winding down.
indeed.
Um, okay, so just a little bit of Briller Jeopardy tonight, because we're gonna keep the live stream short. So the high and low temperatures for the month of March. Any guesses?
The high and the low temperature for the month of March.
Yeah, the
Oh,
record high, the all-time record high, and the
oh, the
all-time record low.
all-time the all-time record high.
Right.
Uh, I would think I'm going to take a guess that the all-time record low probably is around the time of the '88 blizzard. So I'll say like two,
Three. March
three.
5th, but not with the '88 blizzard.
Okay,
Uh, March 5th, 1872.
okay.
And
Well,
the
at least
record high.
the record high. My goodness, I probably toward the end of the month. I wouldn't know the year, but I would say I'm not going to say 90, but I'd say like 87 or 86.
86. Actually, it occurred three times. March 5th, but it doesn't give the year. This was the 86 was March 31st, 1998. So it's happened on the 29th, the 31st, and March 5th, but he didn't give the year for that.
Isn't that amazing though? That March the 5th apparently has seen the highest and lowest temperature of the month of March.
Yeah, that is. Well, that's the kind of month it is too. You got half your 1 foot's in 1 foot is in winter, 1 foot is in spring. You've got this, the days getting longer every day, the atmosphere trying to warm up. You still have Arctic cold that this year was left up in the Arctic. And by the way, I want to just point out, a few people mentioned, well, that Arctic coal has to go someplace. And actually, the answer is no, it really doesn't have to go anywhere. It can just stay up there, locked up, and have the lengthening daylight will wind up just warming that air up over time. So
Right.
there's nothing that says that has to break down in a way that cold air comes down and you wind up with these, that quote unquote extension of winter that's happened from time to time in the last 10 or so years, where our winters seem to extend into the month of April. That doesn't necessarily have to work out that way. That cold air could just stay up there and it could just warm up, and that's the end of that.
Didn't you say that the polar ice situation actually improved this
Yes,
winter?
it's the highest since 2012.
Yeah.
And it's pretty significant, by the way, in terms of the amount what is frozen up there. So it's odd because a lot of the idea was, although sometimes I wonder, depending on who it comes from. I don't want to disparage anybody who believes this, because I don't, I can't see the data. But oftentimes people will latch on to things that seem to make sense, and then they wind up being counterintuitive. In other words, you could say that the ocean water temperatures are warm off the East Coast right now. Therefore, it means that something is going to happen 4 or 5 months from now as we go into hurricane season. Well, not necessarily. Or the fact that we had a warm winter means we're going to have a hot summer. Well, not necessarily. One does not necessarily go with the other. So, there was a kind of idea was that, well, the lack of sea ice would be more favorable for blocking, and it wound up being completely the opposite. in terms of what
Right.
the outcome was. So I guess
Right.
those who follow that sort of stuff, I don't mean this as a criticism, but those that follow that sort of stuff um, are going to be probably busy looking at it and says, well, okay, well, why did this happen the way it did? That's all stuff that's above my pay grade, as I like to say.
Well, it's a strange year because we didn't have an El Nino. We did not have a La Nina. This was supposed to be a Lanada or a more typical type of winter
Right.
based upon long range, records. And it turned out to be probably one of the more unusual winters, at least for us here in the I-95 corridor, because of the lack of any snow, not much in the way of cold air. You'd almost think that this was almost more like an El Nino type of pattern as opposed to a nothing pattern. And now that supposedly we're going to be heading toward a La Nina pattern toward the middle and latter part of this year. What's that going to bring?
Well, that would be favorable for a very active hurricane season. By the way, I'm running the upper air on the GFS from late this afternoon. I'll bring you back up full screen in a second. But I'm looking at this, and there were hints on a couple of runs back of some Scandinavian blocking developing and pushing into Greenland. It really isn't there on the last few runs. So I'm not overly impressed. I just find it hilarious that we went from the models showing this sort of blocky nature showing up in the overall pattern, and the polar vortex breaking down for a couple of runs, and then it just goes right back to the wrapped up polar vortex up in the Arctic region. It just it's that's the kind of year the winter that it has been, and there's nothing that's going to change anytime soon.
It really does feel a lot like, and I could remember back to the winter of 72, 73, which ultimately gave New York City the lowest amount of snow, 2.8 inches for the entire season. But I could remember that. And I remember there were a few disappointments that year with storms passing off to our south. Of course, we had, a few weeks ago, we had a snowstorm that hit North Carolina but
Right.
didn't give us anything. It feels very much like that. I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but in the three other winters at Central Park where less than 5 inches of snow fell, the very next winter, snow came back big time. In fact, the
Yes.
average the average of those three winters in terms of snowfall at Central Park, 40.1 inches. And this after the previous winters where we had less than 5 inches of snow. So maybe, if I may use the term that the old Brooklyn Dodgers were used to when they were playing here in the New York area, wait till next year. It might very well be uh, something to hope for or hang your hat on if you're a snow lover, that next year may not be quite as rough as what we saw this
Well,
year.
and the other thing is below average years in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were quite common. You strung together 3, 4, 5 years in a row of below average snowfalls in the I-95 corridor, whereas since the year 2000, 06, 07, 07, 08, back to back below normal years, that was the only pair. Now we have 18, 19, and 19, 20 as being a pair of back to back years. So if we're in this sort of decadal period where that's somebody else's, my friend's phone. Um, so so he has, you would know my phone because I have my ringer is the theme to Perry Mason.
Uh,
Exactly. Da da. Um, I'm sorry. So what I was saying was, I was getting at was, um, during this decadal period where we've had unusually heavier snowfalls than normal over the last 20 years, 06, 07, 07, 08 is the only back to back below normal year in the stretch. Now we have 18, 19, and 19, 20 as back to back below normal year. So if it follows the pattern of the last 2 decades, then next year should be back to above average snowfall for the I
right,
95 corridor. Unless we're
right.
going back to the days when you'd have 4 or 5 winters in a row with disappointing snowfalls, and then every once in a while, every sixth winter, you wind up with something that was, that's robust with regards to snowfall. We'll find out next winter when we get there.
Right. If we get there.
Well, God willing.
Yeah.
Try to be an optimist about these things.
I will.
I'm booked, so I have to be. I have to be there. So
It's like what George Burns said. He booked himself for his 100th birthday at the Palladium.
Palladium, and
20 days.
yeah, they asked him. They asked him about death. He said, "I don't have time. I'm booked."
Right,
which,
exactly.
which is perfectly true. That's actually where where I got that from was George Burns.
Can we check the chat board or?
You do that. I can't do it on mine because I'm on a single screen until I get back home, and then I'll have the double screen again.
Right.
So
Just
anything exciting?
Anthony Orr said, oh, no, that's not what I wanted to see. I was looking for something else. Oh, Scott Briller. I think it's amazing that Joe, 1,100 miles south, can have the same or lower highs than New York metro area.
Yeah, the only difference is that I can go to a beach where the water temperatures are in the 70s.
Exactly.
So there's a huge difference. Plus, there's a heated pool here and a hot tub.
See? How much longer are you going to be down in the Sunshine State?
Actually, it's quite possible that I may be leaving tomorrow night. So if that's the case, then there won't be a live show tomorrow night.
Okay.
Okay, depending on the timing, because we may start driving back late in the evening. So if we don't wind up leaving until 9 or 10 o'clock, then maybe I'll squeeze in a live cast. But if there really isn't too much going on, I may just very well skip it.
Okay.
Well, you got your short fuse update, so everybody can make sure that they've subscribed to your YouTube channel, Joe Rayo Weather, and this way you get Joe's short fuse live weathercast when he does it, and there are days when he does his short fuse and we do our live stream together. So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
I'm looking at Ms. Spellent.
Spell it.
It looks like Spellerite. Ms. Spellerite.
Okay.
Good. Sphallerite. I've never seen that name before.
No, I've seen her name on there. She's been there before.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody is well. Quick question, Joe. Can you revisit potential for snow and cold temperatures in Central Plains middle to late next week? I've got a job site work kicking off.
All right, hang on one second. Let's look real quick. Okay. Well, that EPO goes negative. So we'll just take a look at what the GFS has to say. So, this is through this week. You actually do have something happening this coming weekend in parts of the Dakotas and on up into Montana. This is the one part that is going to wind up being on the cold side. So you might have some chances here with this East Pacific oscillation that's forecast to go negative for next week. Cold air is going to be spreading across southern Canada. You are going to have frontal boundaries down to the south. So looks like some action into the Dakotas on Sunday, and then again another system that comes out into Colorado early next week on Monday, Tuesday, and eventually spreads up into Nebraska and then weakens as it moves up to the northeast. So yeah, I think you're going to see some chances here with the pattern. It's certainly favorable for the central and northern plains. Certainly not favorable for the northeast.
What else is new?
Exactly. So let's call it a night, okay?
Yeah, so Scott Briller wanted me also to announce that for all of you who have MeTV, tomorrow night on the 6:30 episode, The Flintstones, the very first Flintstone episode.
Oh, my.
Season 1, Episode 1. And he also wants to point out, well, I want to point out, that on Wednesday night on MeTV, the very last episode of Hogan's Heroes.
Oh,
so there you go. First and the last.
Well, we're both into nostalgic television, so I get it. All right, pal.
Now that we're in semi-retirement, what else do we have to do?
Well, that's true.
Watch old TV shows.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. All right, so maybe we'll see you tomorrow, okay?
Maybe.
Thanks, everybody, for being here, folks. We'll see you soon. Good night.